Australia is a country and a continent that has many surprises in store for us. It is a country steeped in history, where for generations more than 200 ethnic groups have coexisted, which subsequently makes it a very culturally rich country. Whether through its flourishing biodiversity, its lush landscapes, or its absolutely charming population, Australia has lots to teach us. 75% of its species remain unknown to scientists, which represents a goldmine of knowledge for both medicine and science. 91% of its surface is covered with vegetation. It houses the Great Barrier Reef, which is still considered to be the largest living organism in the world today. Clearly, Australia is a paradise we need to protect and explore, but it also has lots of interesting facts as well as sites that you might not have heard of. But before we start, I would like to remind those of you who have just arrived on our channel, don't forget to subscribe if you like our videos, and also click on the bell to receive a notification every time we publish new content. And now, enough small talk, let's get started. Number 1. Almost half of Australians were born abroad. According to some studies, nearly 49% of the population is either born abroad or has a parent who comes from abroad and who has chosen to emigrate and then settle in the country. Among the countries where emigration to Australia is the highest are the United Kingdom, China, the Middle East, and Vietnam. And it seems that in recent years, the trend of immigration from Asian countries, east and south, is starting to increase. These rates are well above those of all other countries, far ahead of Canada and the United States, which are stable at 20% and 13% respectively. You can find on the landmass more than 200 indigenous populations with their own languages and dialects. Therefore, although the official language spoken in the country is English, it is not spoken in all households. In fact, around 21% do not speak it at home. However, this sharp rise in immigration rates is worrying to some. We can't say for certain that this trend is unanimous. Certain groups within the country accuse these immigrants of taking or even simply stealing Australian jobs. This point of view backs itself up. It could be therefore that in the coming years, to remedy this, there will be a hardening of the procedures and conditions for obtaining Australian nationality. But we assure you for the moment, it is not. Interesting fact number 2, Australia has more kangaroos and sheep than humans in its territory. Indeed, Australia closely follows China in terms of sheep population, reaching nearly 100 million within the country, which is more than 3 times its current human population of around 25 million. Their large number shows the important place occupied by Australia in the world of production of wool, and we thank them. But sheep are not the only animal species to prosper in the Australian continent. Kangaroos appear to be following this trend, with their numbers reaching, according to recent reports, 50 million scattered across Australia, which serves to give us a great idea of how welcoming the land seems to be for the living species that inhabit and thrive there. Then we tackle fact number 3. 90% of the population lives less than 50 kilometers from the coast. And this isn't surprising. Australia is a continent covered by a single country. It is also an island, the largest island in the world to be exact. Therefore, it's surrounded by the ocean. Australia has a total of 10,685 beaches in its territory, and I can tell you it would take you decades to visit them all. Taking into account that the interior of the territory is mainly desert, it is only natural that most of the inhabitants choose to settle near the coasts. But did you know? Swimming in public beaches in Australia has been banned for over 60 years. Indeed, from 1838 to 1902, Sydney announced that during the day this practice was quite simply prohibited, under the pretext that it raised a problem of morality, if we translate it literally. Today you can find signs on many beaches detailing all the specific prohibitions instead, depending on the dangers presenting themselves there. You can of course bathe there, but we must warn you. For example, it is common to cut off access to certain beaches during the jellyfish season. Some of them, not including enclosures and not being protected, represent too great a danger, and it is therefore forbidden to swim in them. Bear in mind, if you do, it is at your own risk, of course. Number 4. Australia's first police force was made up of detainees. And no, you're not dreaming. These forces, which then consisted of just 12 people, included amongst its members the most exemplary inmates, charged with helping to monitor and maintain the security in the city of Sydney. They were given the name of Night Watch, which can literally translate to Garde de Nuit in French. It was formed in 1789 by Governor Arthur Phillip, and it can be said that there was something extraordinary about these measures for the time: criminals who uphold the law. Moving on to number 5, they created the first LGBTQ+ radio channel in Australia, which remains the one and only in the country today. Called Joy Radio, it was created in 1993 and was broadcast on a part-time basis, sharing the air with many other broadcasters on the same frequency. It is a community radio station that has evolved over the years to become the symbol it is today. We should also mention the existence of a gay bar, the Peel Hotel, which were granted the right in 2007 to refuse the entry of heterosexual men and women, or even of heterosexual women as well, in order to reduce, it is cited, violence and insults based on sexual orientation. Already at that time, the main concern was to preserve the atmosphere of this meeting place and a good understanding aimed at these minorities, thus representing a place where they could meet and bond without fear of judgment. And now it's on to interesting fact number 6. Australians love Vegemite. And if you're not familiar with their culture, you might now be wondering what it is. It is a preservative based on yeast extracts like beer, which takes the form of a fairly salty brown paste. It was invented in 1923, and Australians have been consuming it ever since. It's relatively unknown outside the territory, and it's hard to say what exactly it tastes like. The best way is to taste it for yourself when you get there. A real Australian or New Zealand experience is guaranteed. Number 7. They have doctors doing home visits by helicopter. This is a measure put in place by the government and their health system to allow people living in the most isolated areas of the territory to have access to emergency care and quality medical interventions. These costs are fully covered by the government, and frankly, hats off to them. Number 8. They created the Drop Bear story to scare tourists. It is nothing more than a fictional story, invented from scratch for the tourists who remain today the main targets. As if by consensus, they tell the tale of a killer koala, a predator and carnivore who attacks passers-by. Waiting in the treetops, the animal watches for the passage of uninformed visitors. Often these stories serve as a warning to tourists and particularly amuse the locals, who know koalas as docile, herbivorous creatures with whom they somehow coexist. To take the joke a little further, some give advice on how to avoid them. Put a fork in your hair, cover yourself with Vegemite, etc., just to push the ridiculous one step further. Number 9. Australians and alcohol, a real love story. As you probably know, there are many countries that are fond of alcohol, and at some point in their history leaned into the abundant production of wine or beer. And Australia is one of them. You can count in the territory more than 60 distinct regions of wine production, which account annually for the total of 1.3 billion liters of wine. If you enjoy drinking, you will be served. At the same time, its inhabitants consume almost as much beer, namely 1.7 billion liters to be exact. For those who don't want to do the math, that's about 680 bottles of beer, or 96 liters per person on average. And you will know that their former Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, for a few years held the world record in the Guinness World Book of Records for having swallowed 2.5 pints of beer in barely 11 seconds. You have to admit, that's quite impressive. And finally, number 10. The last thing in this ranking, a participation rate in gambling games that is just mind-blowing. It is said that over 80% of the population regularly participate in this kind of practice. Bets of all kinds, from slot machines to horse races to online games such as casinos, liven up the days of Australians. This is by far the highest rate in the world, and while this may sound like a trivial fact, it does raise a real question about the regulation of gambling in the country, one way or another. Some statistics show that it has become like an addiction for this part of the population. In short, a real public health problem that leaves many Australians vulnerable and generates enormous losses. And as a little bonus for the end, did you know that it's possible for you in Australia to find and buy kangaroo meat in supermarkets without too much difficulty? Apparently, the latter would be a much better alternative than beef or even lamb because of its caloric composition, and it's low in fat. And there you go, friends, it's already the end of this video. Our ranking of the top 10 interesting facts to know about Australia is now complete. Don't hesitate to visit this beautiful country if you have the opportunity. If you like this video, don't hesitate to give it a like, share it, and leave us a comment. We have other similar content on our channel, Four Corners Facts, so be sure to check it out.